Hello and welcome back to A Cup of Poetry. We've changed our format a bit. Now each episode will feature a variety of poetry experts and readers that join us in our studio to delve deeply into the themes that we find in poetry. At the start of each year, it's customary to reflect back on the years before, at who we were as younger versions of ourselves. In this episode, we'll be featuring 4 poets as they reflect on childhood: A. Milne, Edgar Allan Poe, Robert Frost, and A. Housman. We'll start with Milne, read by Stephen Meltzer.
My name is Stephen Meltzer. I'm the Associate Publisher and Executive Managing Editor for Dutton Children's Books and Dial Books for Young Readers. And I'm here today to talk to you about the poem Disobedience by Alexander Milne. Milne wrote these stories for his son Christopher Robin in the 1924 book When We Were Very Young. He wrote all his poems and stories about Winnie the Pooh with his son Christopher Robin in mind. He was a playwright and editor at Punch magazine, and he continued as a prolific writer until his death in 1956. And now, Disobedience by A. Milne. James Morrison, Weatherby George Dupree, took great care of his mother, though he was only 3. James said to his mother, "Mother," he said he, "you must never go down to the end of the town if you don't go down with me." James Morrison's mother put on a golden gown. James Morrison's mother drove to the end of town. James Morrison's mother said to herself, said she, "I can get right down to the end of the town and be back in time for tea." King John put up a notice: "Lost or stolen or strayed. James Morrison's mother seems to have been mislaid. Last seen wandering vaguely, quite on her own accord. She tried to get down to the end of the town, 40 shillings reward." James Morrison, commonly known as Jim, told his other relations not to go blaming him. James said to his mother, "Mother," he said he, "you must never go down to the end of the town without consulting me." James Morrison's mother hasn't been heard of since. King John said he was sorry. So did the Queen and Prince. King John, somebody told me, said to a man he knew, "If people go down to the end of the town, well, what can anyone do?" Now then, very softly, J.M.M.W.G. Dupree took great care of his mother, though he was only 3. J. said to his mother, "Mother," he said he, "you must never go down to the end of the town if you don't go down with me."
The dichotomy between the central character in Milne's poem, James Morrison Weatherby George Dupree's being abandoned by his mother, and Milne's own son Christopher Robin, who was showered with the prolific stories written just for him, is pretty striking. One of poetry's most famous abandoned orphans is Edgar Allan Poe. Poe's mother passed away soon after his father abandoned the family, and the loss seems to have affected him deeply. In Alone, read by Clinton Wilson, he offers a glimpse into how he felt as a boy.
Alone by Edgar Allan Poe. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. Just as kids would like to get together and share ghost stories late at night during a slumber party, when my cousins and friends would come over, I would have them enact certain scenes from Edgar Allan Poe in shadow plays that we'd perform.
Nostalgia for childhood, be it sad or joyful, is one of the things many poets have in common. Robert Frost's poem Birches delves into that nostalgia.
Hi, I'm Matt Boyd. I'm the publishing coordinator here at Penguin Group, and today I'll be reading Birches by Robert Frost. Birches is really one of my favorite poems. As someone who doesn't write any poetry or doesn't read much poetry, I love the accessibility of his language. Most of his poems appear so simple, but there's really a lot going on. Birches in particular takes one concrete image, that of Birches having been bent down, and kind of goes from there to expound upon childhood and death and life and all this great stuff. And the poem reads very conversationally, but it's very carefully planned when you look at it. And the thing I like about this is it's very nostalgic. So it makes me think about my childhood in a way that I think is very real, where you remember things not necessarily the way they happened, but the way they should have happened. Birches by Robert Frost. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter-of-fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them, as he went out and in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and he could play alone. One by one he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim, and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations, and life is too much like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good, both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches.
There's a fine line between feelings of nostalgia for childhood, recollections of wonderful summer days past, and that twinge of hindsight you get when you look back at decisions either made or not made, the regret that comes with the innocence and naivety of childhood. The classical English poet A.E. Housman wrote a collection of short rhyming poems called A Shropshire Lad. In this collection, he explores the idea of fleeting youth. Here is When I Was 1 and 20 from A Shropshire Lad, read by me, Sarah Christensen Fu. When I was 1 and 20. When I was 1 and 20, I heard a wise man say, "Give crowns and pounds and guineas, but not your heart away. Give pearls away and rubies, but keep your fancy free. But I was 1 and 20, no use to talk to me." When I was 1 and 20, I heard him say again, "The heart out of the bosom was never given in vain. 'Tis paid with sighs aplenty and sold for endless rue. And I am 2 and 20, and oh, 'tis true, 'tis true." Check back soon for another cup of poetry.